everybody, and welcome back to the funniest tweets. Today, we are basking in the glory of the Singapore Grand Prix. We're going to review what went on through the story of your amazing tweets, in which you have submitted so many of them, and I can't wait to dive into them. So let's get into it right now. Ferrari Strats. Now, with having a segment like Ferrari Strats, you'd think I'd be going into some kind of pit of despair to talk about how Ferrari threw away a particular race victory, potentially, or whatnot. There were some questionable decisions, don't get me wrong, but they were for the good of Carlos Sainz to win the race. At Defo Not The Stig, Ferrari telling Charles to go 5 seconds behind Carlos for the sake of the team. Now, as a devout Charles Leclerc fan, as you will all know, through the multitude of clips that I and Tommy have shared where Charles Leclerc's race has gone wrong and so on and so forth. And I'm finding it hard to process what's going on at the moment at Ferrari. Not taking anything away from Carlos, because he is driving so well. Like, ever since Zandvoort, pretty much, he has leveled up his game, and Charles hasn't been able to match it through one reason or another. Carlos has been the better driver over the last few races. And to see Ferrari pretty much sacrificing, as they used, Charles Leclerc for the good of Carlos Sainz was different. It was a strange feeling. It's not one I particularly enjoyed, but it kind of made sense. At the Dragon Psycho, Carlos really took that P1 curse personally. Now, for those of you that don't know what the P1 curse is or was, essentially whenever we interviewed a driver, that next race they would have the worst race ever. So Ocon we interviewed, and he then had the most penalties anyone's ever had in Formula 1 history. We've had it with a few other drivers along the way. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo had that problem at Zandvoort, and so on and so forth. And everyone's like, oh, it's a curse. Ever since we've interviewed Carlos Sainz, he has quite literally Uno reversed us and had the best races ever, including, of course, the Singapore Grand Prix, and taking the dub. The big old W for Ferrari. Unreal. I can't get over how good of a race that was, considering how much of a slow burner it felt. That last 15 to 20 laps, oh my days. At Mr. Idiot, you deserve it. Is that all you need? With a Ferrari win. Yes. It felt so good to see Carlos win, because of course his other victory was Silverstone, where some people criticised him for making some mistakes, and obviously Ferrari sort of screwing Charles over at Silverstone. You then look at Singapore. He deserved every single bit of that win. The way in which he not only obviously got pole position, beat George Russell, beat Charles Leclerc, beat everybody, but also to then manage the race in a way that was so measured, so calm, so composed, and especially in those last 10 or so laps, to win only his second Grand Prix, and to manage that second gap to Lando, to give him DRS, but not allow him to be too close to overtake after that long straight. Massive big brain IQ. This video is sponsored by FanHome. FanHome is a new brand dedicated to developing unique collections and build-up models such as this wonderful Lotus Renault 97T, which is a legendary car that Ayrton Senna drove.
There are other amazing brands as well that you can start collecting from, such as Marvel and Star Wars, as well as providing a fully illustrated magazine like the one I have right here.
All you need to do is to check out the FanHome website to start collecting, which you will see on screen now and in the description below.
There's also an early bird gift where you receive a cap and t-shirt, so you better get involved fast.
So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get started. At Wally21Men, Carlos Sainz giving DRS to Norris to protect him from the Mercedes. Now, you see it a lot in like F1 games stuff and F1 esports, and it's very, it's easier to do it when you're sat at home on your computer. To do it at 200 miles an hour and to manage and process what you need to do every single lap to perfection, to not give Lando too much of a run to actually put you at a vulnerable position to lose the win. I can't stress how unbelievably impressed I am with how Carlos managed that whole situation. You had two Mercedes that were 2-3 seconds a lap quicker through most of that medium stint. If he messed up giving Lando DRS even once, he was going to potentially lose that victory. So to have the minerals to pull that off, Carlos Sainz, you're making a proper name for yourself, my friend. Jones_RF873, Carlos has become the curse breaker. Not only of the P1 curse, but also the Max Verstappen, Red Bull, Sergio Perez streak that's been going on this entire year. Did any of us, in our wildest imaginations, think that we would have a Grand Prix weekend where Red Bull literally wouldn't challenge for the win the entire race? Like they weren't at any point in the shout for the victory. It's not like we had a close race. Oh my God, will they keep the streak? No, they were nowhere. They had no pace. Then they were screwed over by the safety car, so they had to stay out on hard, and everyone else was just absolutely mugging them. I am finding it hard to process what I have just watched. Russell retires. Right, George Russell fans, you might want to look away because there is a segment about George obviously making that mistake on the final lap of the race. My heart bleeds for him because that was such a difficult pill to swallow, to watch him potentially fighting for the victory. At one point, you know, myself and Tommy on our watch along on Twitch, we thought actually George was looking in the pound seats to win. And then obviously on the final lap, you're thinking, can he get past Lando? Lando clips the wall. George follows him and hits it even harder. And he's out the race on the final lap. Obviously, he's trying so hard to get in a good position after the hairpin into that next DRS straight. And it just didn't work out for him. Jack Mace 07. It just completely turned in on me. And it's a bit early. But the memes, there were a lot of memes about George. So I have to include it. But it does feel slightly painful to say it out loud. At Clichy, George Russell race summary. In fact, I would probably colour most of the horse in up until literally the very last ear. That was lap 62. And to be honest with you, another talking point about it all was, should he have let Lewis Hamilton go? I completely get why he didn't and wouldn't. But if he had, I think Lewis Hamilton could have won that race because he was looking so quick at the end in those last few laps. George, I think, spent maybe a bit too much of his tyres at the beginning of that medium stint. Lewis was looking so quick. But I completely understand why he didn't. But that is a problem Mercedes will have. Another one actually from Matt Clichy. It looks like they're going to sacrifice Leclerc. When that team radio came in, obviously it's not Ferrari saying we're going to sacrifice Leclerc, but another team assessing the Ferrari situation and thinking they're going to sacrifice Leclerc. I was like, how has the tables turned so aggressively right now that Leclerc is literally just a number 2 driver? At Formula Twist, it's not the best Photoshop skills I've ever seen. The wall turned in on me. Okay, I'm a fight for P2. Damn, the wall got hands. I love that meme template. Just the got hands bit is just so good. That's probably, look, no disrespect, Formula Twist. You could work on the Photoshop, but it still made me laugh. At Screwed Rear F1, this is the penultimate one. It's not the final one, I promise. George Russell's race, quite apt actually, because it was looking pretty good through most of it, and then made that gamble, obviously on the mediums, and looking even better. That's where the graph goes up a little bit more. And then on the last lap, into the wall. And finally, Ahmed_Bagbar, these AWS graphics are getting out of hand. Super into the wall. I actually don't mind that AWS graphic that much. You know, the 1 centimetre super close to the wall. That part I don't really need to be told that 1 centimetre is super close to the wall, especially when there's an image of how close the cars are to the wall. But they probably don't really know what other text to put in that sort of graphic window. So I guess they just do that. But they should have done that as well. That's one way to get AWS involved. Before we dive into any more memes, I just want to say that our Patreon has now launched. So if you want to get involved with more exclusive podcasts, a dedicated podcast series about classic races called A Short View Back to the Past, a private Discord, being able to just support the P1 venture. We've got loads of other perks like early access to live events, ad-free listening to our podcasts, lots of stuff. Check out the link in the description. It'll be right there. Honourable mentions. Right, our first honourable mention is about Haas at Karen8263. Haas every weekend. Oh, it's so disappointing, isn't it? Especially from K-Mag's POV, who had actually an amazing qualifying, but then K-Mag in the race struggles and also just gets into trouble. You know, had black and white flags, had investigations left, right, and centre, trying to fight for that final point, but just doesn't work. Haas just chew up those tyres like no tomorrow. At the Milkurian, Verstappen after finishing 5th. It's so true. You know, we're all like, oh my God, Verstappen's finally been, conquered, overthrown. And I'm sure Max, to be fair, after qualifying, he seemed pretty fuming. And I'm sure after the race, he had pretty low expectations. He didn't think he was going to get on the podium or win. So I'm sure he wouldn't be too distressed. And also the fact is he's won another world championship. There's no way he's going to get beaten. So is there really any problem for Max? Not really. I'm sure it'll annoy him for all of a couple of minutes. Atcho Gamer 6p, Red Bull today. At one point, Red Bull, I think it was 20 laps to go, Red Bull were in 15th and 17th. Do you remember looking at the classification and going, am I dreaming? Am I going to wake up to an actual Singapore Grand Prix that is happening where Max Verstappen is 45 seconds clear and Perez is probably in 3rd? No. Today was real. Ferrari won, Red Bull not on the podium, and we heard the Spanish and Italian national anthems. It was refreshing. At the Vortex 99, Alonso watching other teams develop their cars. Oh, Fernando had a bit of a stinker, didn't he? Both his team, obviously, with the slow pit stop, and then Fernando making that mistake. Singapore was supposed to be the race. Fernando hyping up. Yeah, Monaco, Singapore, that's where we're going to be. We're never coming off the podium ever again. Aston Martin, they've done a Haas in some ways, where Haas come out the blocks firing. They look really good. Obviously, even more so because Fernando has had several podiums this year. And now the tracks they're supposed to be good at, they're nowhere. At Mr. Idiot, my heart has been knocked out of my body. How tense were you, genuinely, on those last laps? Because I was clinging on for dear life during our watch-along. I mean, it could not have been a more tense situation where you have Sainz in the lead. Obviously, he's only had one win. Norris in 2nd, never won before. Both of them on old, hard tyres. Russell in 3rd, only one win. Hamilton hasn't won since flipping Saudi Arabia 2021. Both of those two on fresh mediums, flying towards the front two. Hamilton looking a bit closer, faster than Russell. It was just nail-biting. And it shows that you don't need massive overtaking. It constantly just reiterates that if you have a slightly slower car winning and faster cars behind, it is tense and it is enjoyable. And Formula One, my God. We saw what it would be like without Red Bull in 2023. It came to life in Singapore. And just look what it gave us. At Dom Dom Drum Drum, it just kept getting more and more intense. It really did, didn't it? The race start... I mean, to be fair, the race start up until the VSC was slow. A lot of people saying, oh my God, this is so boring. I didn't personally find it that boring, to be honest with you. Yes, we didn't have much action, but it was still interesting the way Carlos was having to basically back up the pack in order for no one to then go for a two-stop. Obviously, the VSC happened and that allowed that to occur, but it was still close. There was still strategy. Yes, it wasn't at all a crazy race, but at least you had cars very close at the front. One small incident could have changed everything, and then it just turned into complete carnage. At Jana Marie Cole, the Williams this weekend. Not only was the Red Bull a tractor, but the Williams, yeah, it's unfortunate because the Williams, they have created a better car where it works at more tracks. Because I remember a few years ago, it would literally only work at like Monza, and that was about it. And then maybe they'd turn up at a few other weekends and they're like, we don't really know why, but we're quick. Now Williams seem to have a car that they can at least compete in the sort of midfield. But Singapore was not a good race, although Albon just got completely yeeted by Perez at the end. And Albon could have got a point, which would have been amazing. Not so great for Lawson. But instead, Perez just went, I am going to steam up your inside at this hairpin in the middle part of the lap before that next DRS, where Max made a lot of moves. So yeah, poor Albon for that. At R. Harris 2004, my heart the last 20 minutes of the Singapore Grand Prix. I will take a very long time to process and to calm down from this Grand Prix. I cannot wait for the podcast. I cannot wait to talk about it more. It's going to take a while. I might have to watch the race back again to really understand what those last 15 laps were. But my goodness me, it hit even harder, didn't it? Just purely because we've gone through this entire Red Bull domination to then have a race where 4 cars could win. It was almost too much. We're all like, we're not used to this. At Boosted Stephen, they finally had enough. Lando, Lewis, George. Yeah, I mean, Charles, that's actually quite a good picture because Lando, Lewis and George are all kind of, getting involved. Charles is just 20 seconds back, having not a great race after being sat in the dirty air for the whole race and basically being a sacrificial lamb. But yeah, I guess Charles can be involved. At This Is Kush, the Dutch national anthem right now. Very lonely, wasn't it? The Dutch national anthem wasn't played. We haven't heard it. We've heard it for 10 races in a row, and we finally heard something different. I'm sure we'll hear back again in Suzuka. I am petrified as to what Max Verstappen is going to do to us at Suzuka. I feel like he is going to be even more motivated to give us the most uncompetitive race for first we've ever seen. So be prepared for that. Fingers crossed, Red Bull won't be that good and we'll have another amazing race, but I'm a little bit scared. Right, it's Tommy's tasty tweet time. Tommy, who has won an amazing copy of F123 by winning this segment?
The winner is the Eric 1997 with this wonderful little Star Wars meme about your powers of Max being biggest flop. Now, you predicted him once. Didn't happen, but boy, did it work this time.
I will be cashing in that point on the podcast, putting it in the bank, because it's, I think, the only one I've probably scored this week, considering how crazy the result is. Thank you so much, Tommy!
Bye.
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 Right, that is it. Thank you so much for watching the funniest tweets to the Singapore Grand Prix. Ferrari back on top. And don't worry, I know we need some time to process, but tomorrow it's race week again as we head to Suzuka, one of the most iconic tracks in the world. Will Red Bull be back? Will Ferrari be quick again? And my heart may not be able to take it. Who knows? But we'll have to find out next weekend. Big shout out to EA for sponsoring Tommy's Tasty Tweet. And we'll see you very soon for another piece of content. Bye! Ferrari on top!